Here we go. Hey guys, what's up? Snowboard Joe here. This one's going to be a bit different. This is my good friend Matt. He's helped me several times through a lot of things, but
Good evening, guys.
it, yeah, and he's going to need to be in the spotlight because he's got a lot of experience in you know people go to war, and we know that war is a really bad thing. But what's often neglected is what happens after the fact. And a lot of that just kind of gets swept under the rug. It's almost like a trope that you see someone drinking on the side of the street and looking crazy. You're like, oh, he's probably just a homeless veteran. And it's like, is that really the best that we can do? And why are we allowing that? We're allowing we have a mental health crisis in this country on so many levels all over the place, and it really needs to be cleaned up. And he has a lot to say about AA, how that's helped him, and the VA system. But I kind of want to bring it back to the beginning and how, you wanted to be in the military. You always like that. You love your country. And he, let's talk about, because the addiction, you basically had some really bad, you got shot,
Yep.
and that is kind of what got you in an involuntary addiction. You were never an addicted person. You weren't drinking, partying, and doing all that before you went into the military as a young man. So, why don't you talk about a little bit of your experience going into the military and all that, and then what happened, and then we can go to the after effects. So, we'll kind of give your whole, origin story here. So, Matt can have the floor, and this is about him, but also, guys, he is representative of thousands of other veterans who have a very similar. It's not going to be this exact story, but it's going to parallel so many people's lives, and no one really talks about this stuff. We kind of view our soldiers as pawns a lot of the time, to be honest. Like, maybe without knowing it, but we kind of do, because once they're here afterward, the care could be better, and we kind of need to value them a little bit better, because they're making crazy sacrifices for their body, mind, spirit, finances, health, relationships, family, things like that. So, and I also want to get into how you do, and the reason we have a tiger up here is he also found a little bit of healing through working with tigers in Thailand and stuff, which is its own pretty amazing and badass story, as well. So,
That's also where I met my wife too.
yeah, who's not an American Slav woman here. But that's besides the fact. We'll keep it positive. So go ahead, Matt. Tell kind of your origin story and how, you know
Yeah.
how just take the floor and say what you want to say, to give, like, we're the goal here is that we're trying to give a message that's going to help other people, and maybe help certain systems like AA, VA, and maybe people who are afraid to talk about what they did there, what happened, and who are holding it in, who are struggling with like addictions and alcohol and stuff, because they're not, when you don't talk about certain things and deal with certain emotions and stuff, they kind of basically get trapped inside your body. And the only thing you can do is numb it, numb it, numb it, numb it, numb it, numb it. And it never really goes away. So that stays in your body and causes dis-ease. And it's gone to the point where some people actually kill themselves because they have not only those emotions they didn't deal with, but they're just numbing it with drugs and alcohol, and that eventually that won't work.
Right.
Eventually something has to fail and give out. So,
Either your health or your
Matt
mind.
overcame that, and now he helps others overcome that as well, and that's probably his passion now.
So you asked me to start this story, where it, I guess I would say that probably the best place to begin is with 9/11. I was already in the
Perfect.
ROTC at the University of La Crosse in Wisconsin And I was in what I was seeking to do was to be in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, which is to go and be a lawyer in the military. And whether you work on defense or prosecution, probably in some places both. Um, uh, that's how I was how I what I joined the ROTC to do. They were paying part of my fee for tuition to go to school.
Mm.
And I was a political science major with a constitutional law minor. And a 9/11 sort of changed the footing in the U.S. Army, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
Um,
Just one quick thing. Nine
yeah.
11 is the most important, not important, but the most, it's the linchpin for our entire lifetime. It still is changing so much today. 9/11 has it we don't even understand how important it is. Like we forget about it, but it's one of the most important days in our 250-year history. In our modern lifetime, they've already called in the 2000s, we're pretty much it's already the most important thing. 1 year in, it's pretty much almost the most important thing.
Um, well, I remember what that was like on that day. But the most important thing was how it changed the army, because they went from sort of a semi-peace footing to a war footing almost overnight. And um, people got their contracts extended. It was looked at as an emergency. There were people that were called up with specific skill sets where they had their stay in the army, their contracts extended if they had valuable skill sets. And my my path went from being a on the lawyer side, right, the Judge Advocate General, which is a non-combat role, right, obviously, and I was recruited into the combat side because what they were seeking almost right off the bat were people that showed exceptional aptitude, intelligence, and aptitude. That's what they were really going for. Um, and these types of candidates were the candidates that made ideal recruits in units like what I was recruited into.
So does some of that consist perhaps of IQ
Yes.
and certain personality? Because people think a lot of times people think uh, that you just need grunts to go out there, and people don't understand how smart you have to be in these environments and to be particularly be very strong under stress because you're going to be you're not going to be it's a war zone. You can't be a dumbass. You have to
Right.
be actually hyper aware and very intelligent because you're responsible for your life, the lives of others, and there's a lot going on there.
You need like a good balance between your physicality as an athlete and your mind, right? You need to have attributes in both fields, right?
In other
That's
words,
what.
you're not just a meathead.
Right.
You're not
No.
just someone who's
No. No.
extremely
No.
strong. You got to
No.
be have
Um,
everything.
to complement what you just said, you take something like the TOW rocket launcher, which is an anti-tank rocket launcher that has a steerable missile that you can guide to the target 2.5, 3 miles away, I think. You need an IQ at the minimum of probably 97 to 100 in order to operate that. So as technology has grown in combat, the requirements to use these weapon systems go up, right? And so you can't rely on a meathead to use a TOW rocket launcher in the middle of combat if he does not
We
have
need
the base
extremely responsible people.
who can keep their
Yeah.
cool under pressure and focus on what they're doing and do it well. And this is why the Army largely shifted my track from JAG to combat arms. And in for combat arms, I initially started out as a combat engineer. I went to basic training and AIT for that, and then I went to a further advanced course called Sapper School, which is they do it out at Fort Leonard Wood. That's the same place where you go to do your basic training for to be a combat engineer or a military policeman. Um, uh, Sapper School is a little bit more hardcore. It's almost like the equivalent of what Ranger School is to the infantry, right? It is you become an expert at logistics in operating behind the enemy lines. That's really what they sought to create with the airborne sappers, and so a lot of it is learning demolition and special demolition, how to bring down specific how to bring down specific infrastructure, how to cut rail, how to destroy buildings, how to identify weak points in structures, that sort of thing. But also doing things like sling loading loads underneath helicopters that are either going to be delivered or picked up, right? So I mean, it's the whole gamut. It is basically facilitating operations when you're detached from a conventional unit. The Rangers operate alongside the Special Forces, and they oftentimes support them in a rapid deployment sense. So they respond when these smaller units come into contact and need help. The sappers were intended to give SOF teams or special operations teams more specialized demolition support. And that grew into, when we went into Iraq, that really grew into learning a great deal about improvised explosives and learning about how Soviet hardware was like artillery shells were jury rigged and to be used against us, and then providing conventional units with that support when we deployed there. And so I had to pause my my undergraduate degree and deploy as an airborne sapper in supporting special operations units. We were billeted in Baghdad International Airport, and we had a flight line. This was 2003. We ran operations out of the Baghdad International Airport until a better field could be found, a more permanent solution could be found for us. But we were attached to helicopters, so-called rotary wing, and that was our transportation. We did everything from supporting urban combat operations, reinforcing units that were in contact. The biggest thing was providing them with demolition support. So if they found an IED, we wouldn't blow it up. We didn't try and defuse it like you saw in some of the movies. We just we had a couple of creative ways of emplacing explosives without putting ourselves at risk close to where we thought the IED was, and then we would just blow it up. I mean, that's really just the easiest way to get rid of these things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And 2004, the attitude sort of shifted on the ground when it came to the Iraqis. And that's when Paul L. Bremer signed the de-Baathification order. He came in, and this was a civilian in the Bush administration. And most of the Iraqi army, right, under Saddam, believed that they would be called back to their units and employed by the government, the coalition government that we had set up. So many of these guys chose not to fight us, took their weapons home, and were sort of waiting to hear that they could come back to their units and resume operations, and they would just be rebuilding Iraq cooperatively with us. Paul L. Bremer came in and said that anybody who was a Ba'athist, which was like all of them in the military, could not come back into the civil government. And overnight, what this did was it put 600,000 Iraqi men with military experience and knowledge of their arms onto the street. They were basically unemployed. And many of them, very many of them, took up the only opportunity that they saw available, which was with what became ISIS. Before that, it was known as Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And they acted as mercenaries. Many of these jihadist groups would pay them essentially like a ransom if they conducted an operation that resulted in a confirmed American casualty.
Yeah.
They would make, something like, $50,000 if they could film themselves killing an American soldier, or if they could film themselves detonating a bomb that killed American soldiers in a Humvee or something like that. And that's really what that war turned into. Was
So it was
not
kind of
these.
like their version of like a shitty BlackRock, because they had no, like, you guys, they have nothing else to do there. Like, that's
Yeah.
all they had as an opportunity to earn for their family or do anything. They had to sort of become an extremist when they didn't necessarily want to be. But if you have no other means of feeding your family, it's kind of the only opportunity that you
Well,
have.
and I also want you to think about this economic dynamic too. A war just happened there, right? The country's infrastructure was shattered, and the Iraqis, like the more professional ones that were like doctors and lawyers, they didn't stick around. Do you know what I mean? They got out of Dodge way before
Yeah.
the bombs started falling. So, like, immediately, even before we did anything in Iraq, you had large parts of the civil service, healthcare, these different sectors of the Iraqi economy go belly up, because all of the professionals that they relied upon to deliver healthcare for like women, that was a huge thing, right? That evaporated
Yeah.
when it became clear that we were going to invade the country. Because
Yeah.
again, all of those professionals that did that, they were the ones who had the ability to get out of Dodge, and so that's what they did. They went to, they went to any of the surrounding Arab countries, and so what you had left in Iraq was really just the Iraqis that did not have the economic means or the ability to get out of Iraq.
Yeah.
And this was a very fertile recruiting ground for these insurgent groups. And there's a maximum that Sun Tzu talks about, that the enemy always adapts if you stay in contact with him long enough. And that's what these groups did. They
Yeah. There's
could
a
dress.
there's
They could.
a famous quote I remember saying, that was regards to this. A American soldier captured a pretty high up Iraqi soldier, and the Iraqi soldier said, "You have the watches, but we have the time." In
Right.
other words, he meant we have the technology and everything like that, but like we're just gonna we have nothing else to do except just stay here and fight. So
Yeah. They could
like
wait
and
us
we'll just
out, in
do
other words.
they'll just do that for decades, literally.
Well, because it's their country, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They eventually they came to the conclusion that sustained pressure and them causing a slow trickle of casualties was going to ebb away at our motivation, our desire to stay there and keep our war running on the ground. And they sort of took the same bent that the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese took towards us in Vietnam. They kind of played the same strategy. Now, it didn't work nearly as well for the Iraqis as it did eventually in Vietnam. But I don't even want to get into that sidetrack. Anyway, so you've got a good idea, a good basis of kind of the situation that I was facing the units that I
You're
was
someone who
supporting.
wanted to be basically a lawyer. You didn't even
Uh,
necessarily want to do, all this, but you had a
yes,
certain
but
skill set and everything that it just ended up the circumstances,
yes, but
dictated
Joe,
that.
just to go back, the Army wasn't the only thing that changed on 9/11. I changed too.
Yeah.
And my thought process, my mentality went from a peace footing to a combat footing, the same way that the Army did. I kind of joked to one of my friends that, well, they killed 2,900 Americans, so I feel like, I owe you 2,900 body bags of whoever's responsible.
Yeah.
And that's how I think about what my
Yep.
mentality was back then. I was very enthusiastic, dedicated to what I was doing. I was the type of guy that would run half marathons on the weekend, and did 2-a-day weightlifting with other guys that were in the ROTC program. I was in fantastic shape. I was able to do it. And as far as I was concerned, because I had all of those things going for it, I felt obligated to do it. And I felt very much that being a soldier came very natural to me. I had many of the prerequisites that you need people to have in order to be a good soldier and a combat leader. And
Yeah.
that's what I developed into. I don't want
But you also
to.
had the values that you liked American. You liked
Absolute,
freedom. You
100%.
liked, democracy. You liked all the ideals, um,
Well, and
that
we're a
America stands
constitutional
for.
republic and not a
Yeah.
democracy. But yes,
But
absolutely.
creating democracy, you know what I mean. Yeah.
A representative government. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I did feel, and I still do feel, that is the answer to a lot of these issues that you're facing, these systemic issues in the Middle East. It is because they have these regimes that rule over these people, that enact these radical agendas, that the people are not really that on board for. Um, uh, you know, and I do feel like the answer actually is a representative governments in the Middle East, and that was one of the major initiatives for going into Iraq. That was a big justification for why we did what we did, was so to say, to drain the swamp of extremism. And we opened up a theater where many of these people that were allied with Osama bin Laden and his group of Al Qaeda lunatics, where they could come and face us. And that's what Iraq kind of turned into. It turned into a sort of like a what is that called? Like a I don't want to say like a mosh pit.
A sand trap.
A shit show.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it kind of turned into like a stage where these jihadists could fight us, and we laid them down. I mean, not to be too vague about it, but there were hundreds of thousands of Arab men who crossed the Iraqi border, who never came out of that country. And you don't have to be a grandmaster chess player to understand what happened to them. They found their way into Iraq to fight us. They fought us, and very many of them did not leave alive.
Yep.
And so it was, that's what Iraq really became. Had we just tried to stay in Afghanistan, I think that the guerrilla war that we were experiencing in Afghanistan would have been much more difficult to prosecute, because you're dealing with a nation that doesn't have a roads. It doesn't have a good
It's
ways
kind of
of
out of the 15th century or something.
yeah,
In a lot of
it
ways.
only it's 1,000 times more rugged. It can
Yeah.
take you, traveling for 13 miles as the crow flies, sometimes can take you 40 days to walk in Afghanistan because of the mountains that you have to traverse with the Hindu Kush. So it is mind bending, to get people to understand how the terrain in Afghanistan is compared to what it is in Iraq. Iraq is flat. It's very flat. It's the desert. It's very sandy, and those conditions suit us. We excel at long range operations. We excel at night operations, but we need logistics and infrastructure in order to do those things. And Afghanistan had none of that. And so that's why I think that those were some big reasons why we opened a second front in the war on terror in Iraq. And it really did drain the Middle East of many of the jihadi elements that we were primarily worried about. So Iraq obligated them to come and face us there instead of them migrating into Europe and continuing the jihad in a more traditionally, like in a more traditional terrorist way, going after soft targets in Europe. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The people that they had available or on hand in order to carry out those operations in Europe, they weren't available because all of those guys went to Iraq. You have to understand, like, the Middle East mindset. They're going to go after the near enemy first, and if we're in Iraq, that's what they're going to gravitate towards, because that's closer to Mecca than Europe is. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't want to, like, I could talk all day long
Yeah,
about
let's
the
get
different
more.
things.
So that's basically how you wound up there, but actually not a lawyer, boots on the ground,
Right.
and more importantly, responsible for other people.
Yes.
You were a leader there in a leadership position, so the responsibility is immense.
Yes.
You're not,
And
in some ways, if you're in some sense, if you're just being told what to do, you're not as responsible, so it's a little bit easier in a sense. You don't have that as much weight on your shoulders, and not that any of it's easy, but your responsibility level is very high, and you take it very serious, of course.
so just to give you an idea, when you train with these people that are professional soldiers, you get to know them, you get to know their families, their wives or girlfriends, their children. You get to know them very well. And they become closer than, like, your own brothers are to you. These are people that you're prepared to lay down your life in order to protect, right? And you're willing to do that because they're willing to do the same thing for you. Do you know what I'm saying? There's that reciprocal relationship, and that's what makes us so dramatically effective as small combat units on the ground. Um, when I talk about being a professional soldier, I liken it to being a professional warrior, because the values and the things that that other people express or give lip service, you live them. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's mutual self-sacrifice in the like to the highest level.
And so, like, starting there, prosecuting like a small like urban combat is a lot like trying to play chess in the dark. You kind of know where your people are and your units are, and the better you can coordinate that, the better off you'll be. But you don't know where they are. You don't know what tools they're bringing to the table. And many times, the first time that you actually get intelligence or learn of something is when they're actually using it against you. That's their big advantage, is to walk into a field of fire of a weapon that they pre-set up on you, and them using it.
And
And
it's they're more used to that environment
right,
too.
right, they're
That's all they know.
right. And we've gotten more sophisticated with giving our people on the ground better eyes on intelligence, with ISR and predator drones and things like that. But back when I was there, these things were still coming of age. And so many of the things that our operators today rely on were not in place when I was there. And I lost people. I lost friends of mine through combat attrition. And you do feel responsible. I mean, there's no way in none of those scenarios would I have made the same choice if I had known what was out there or known what they were going to be facing. Obviously, I would have chosen to do something different. But you when you're the one that's giving the order and you're the one that is directing things, and then something happens, you feel uniquely responsible because it was your decision to go left or right. It was your decision to go forward or halt in place. And this can result in what they call like command paralysis, because people get so they get so consumed by the decision-making process, and they start to second guess themselves that they just stop giving
Yeah.
orders, and
It's
that will
like
get people killed too.
fight, flight, or freeze, and you're like, well, if
Yes,
I freeze, I can't really make a wrong decision. But sometimes not making a decision is also kind of a decision that can also be a wrong decision. So it's
absolutely. You cannot
it,
hesitate.
yeah,
Um, and so it's like um, when these losses happened, uh, you know, um, you compartmentalize. You don't have the opportunity to like say, okay, time out, time out. We just took a loss over here, so stop shooting. We're gonna shut this down for 15 minutes and let's all talk about our feelings. No, it's kind of like I need to put that aside and make sure I don't lose any more of these guys. Do you know what I'm saying? It like that is the thing that drives you forward. And Compartmentalizing these losses that we sustained in the 2004-2005 timeframe was sort of I we would have our small ceremonies where we would do a 21 gun salute or 27 actually guns, but we'd fire 3 times, right? Um, uh, and we would have these small ceremonies, but then it was sort of expected that everybody would report for would be ready to go when we got the call the next time, and when a mission was on the when a mission was being set up. It's not like half your team can turn around and say, listen, I don't think I've got it in me today. Do you know what I'm saying? So you learn to compartmentalize. You learn to put things into the back of your mind and say, you know what, I'll deal with that later. I've got more immediate and pressing business that I need to take care of. Um, and that became like a forced habit, you know. Um, and I don't want to get into too many of these specifics because I feel like we're getting into the maw. I can literally talk about this stuff forever. I sort of want to jump ahead to when I got wounded. When I got wounded, I got shot through my chest. And The burst of enemy gunfire caught me, broke my armor, went through my armor, and parts of the armor and the bullet fragments went through my chest, mostly on my left side, and I bled out. I thought that it was over, and I had kind of resigned myself to that. I was coughing up blood. I had huge wounds in the back of my in my back. I could feel the blood draining out of my body. I was pouring out. I passed out and woke up 28 days later, and they had saved my life, transported me to Germany, and had me in a chemically induced coma. And this is really where my introduction into substances began, because I was having Oxycontin and about 100 other drugs mainlined into my system.
to live.
Um, What?
To basically to
Oh,
live, you know, like
yes.
you
I
didn't you
mean, they were
didn't
doing everything that
get a
they could.
chance in it. Yeah.
Yeah, they were doing everything that they could. I came about as close as one can come to dying and not die, right? Like the chances of a regular just anybody surviving these wounds are infinitesimal. But I did. And you know, I spent
Now,
go
I
ahead.
remember one, and you don't have to go into this if you don't want to, but I recall you telling me that you said you saw like an angel or some, or had some type of experience. You can go into that another time if you want to, or you
Yeah,
can just
let's
focus on the recovery part. Well, all right, we'll
I
keep it grounded in reality.
yeah,
Sure.
like I remember the only memory that I have after after things faded, right? And I'm on the ground and I'm bleeding out and I've got blood running out of my body. The only memory that I have is of darkness and of these angelic wings that sort of embraced me. And I don't know how to say it any, but you know, I either that was real and really happened in a spiritual sense, or you know, my brain had just, you know, run completely out of oxygen and I was imagining it. You can interpret that a thousand different ways, and I'm not willing to like argue it with anybody one way or the other. I
Yeah. Oh, that's fine.
experienced
Yeah.
something very spiritual, and then woke up in an
Well,
incredible
it's a
amount of
near
pain.
death experience,
right right
basically. You know, and those
right
versions happen. People
yeah.
have different versions of things that may or may not happen to them. So,
Yeah. There's this is part of the thing about faith, right? You see things and either you say, well, I just imagine that, or, you know, you say, I'm going to take that as a sign and
mhm.
take it for what it's worth. And excuse me. I at the time did not know how to interpret that. Um, like I said, I woke up in the hospital in Germany, and they had tubes running down my throat. I had tubes running into both of my arms. I mean, I was a mess, and I was a mess for like 13 months. And I think one of the worst things about being in the hospital while I was treated, um, uh, um, at several different facilities, were the nights, because these other guys that were around me, um, uh, many of them would have these traumatic dreams where they were reliving when they got injured and just immediately afterwards, and they would cry out in their sleep. They would cry out, screaming that I'm on fire, and
Jesus.
screaming for their wife. And these were not like little miniature, you know, moans or whatever.
Yeah.
These are men
This is deep
waking
in
up.
their subconscious mind, and it took
Right.
over them. And this is what we're going to get into later. That these things didn't just go away like after a couple months, and they got home and got to play with their dog and shit like that.
In a
It
physiological
sticks
way,
with you.
in a not just in a psychological way, in a physiological way, war
Yeah,
changes your
your
body.
body has
Right.
the memory within its nervous system,
Exactly. Yes.
and these trapped emotions, which are come from your subconscious mind or whatever. And the only way to sort of deal with it is you have to release them through talking and other therapies and stuff. And that may not even do the whole thing. It maybe just can only make it 80% better or something. But that work is difficult, and it's often shunned in our culture, especially as men. It's shunned. Like, and
Yeah.
a lot of it comes from the World War II generation. Like, you don't talk about it. You just shut up. You don't tell anyone about it. You
Well,
don't.
because that's what
That's just
these
how what they
people.
did.
Yeah, that's what these people. They thought that they did. The World War II generation did a lot of the same things that I did when I came home. Um, I self-medicated with alcohol in order to fall asleep at night, so I didn't dream about the things that I did and saw.
Yeah.
Um, and I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. As far as I was concerned, if you weren't over there, and you weren't in uniform, you didn't have I didn't feel any sort of special need to try and explain to other people how I managed to survive a civil war in an Arab country. So I sort of had a very bad attitude, maybe a justifiable attitude, but not an attitude that is like conducive to like treatment or recovery, right?
Yeah, and that's
The
that's part of what, well, I'm assuming you want to talk about what I wanted to bring up is like we need to destigmatize that because people can't move on with their life in a productive manner, and they end up going to drugs and alcohol and
Yes,
everything because and there has to be, we have to make it not seem like a feminine thing to go and talk about it, and take it's part of talking about it is a way kind of uh taking ownership for it, but for your health, for your mental, physical, spiritual health. You're taking ownership of it so you can start fixing it. If they just put it under the carpet, the monster's still under there and you haven't really confronted it and dealt with it. And I think our culture is, we say this with men, like you're not supposed to show any emotion and stuff. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, if you did some of this really bad stuff, like you're almost in, you have to be inhuman to not show any emotion.
right.
And the only
And
way you can do that is just numbing, 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 numbing constantly, constantly. And that only, it just will take some of the edge off on it.
that's Joe, what you just described is exactly what I did for 17 years.
Yeah.
Um, I due to the nature of my injuries, I they put me on OxyContin and oxycodone. I was on that for over a decade at doses that you could kill a rhinoceros with, and it wouldn't touch me. Like I would barely notice it, but it did work for the pain. And to a limited extent, it made me feel like I was also addressing some of the traumatic experiences that I was.
Because it
Um,
temporarily numbs it. So you're like,
right,
oh, well,
exactly.
now I feel a little
Yes,
better. So you have a moment, a
yes.
few moments of clarity. You get a respite and retrieve from it
A
for a
temporary respite. Yes.
few hours maximum.
And this is why they call that like a negative coping mechanism, because you cannot use substances to treat psychological, or you cannot use a physical substance to treat a psychological injury.
Yeah.
That almost guarantees addiction, because that psychological injury is not going to go away, um, and so you're going to keep using the substances habitually, and then the addiction and
And
dependency
they're
issues
also
happen.
addictive in nature, even
Right.
if, look at how addictive they are for people who don't even have that make big of a problem, or
Right.
big of, like they didn't delete anybody or anything like that. They just started taking it in high school or something like that, and they're a full blown addict on the street sucking dick for it.
Yeah.
They're incredibly powerful. In fact, they're so powerful. They've done studies on mice and stuff like that where they get there's like a button they could hit to keep getting dopamine or basically like opiates and stuff, and they
Yep.
just kept hitting the button until they killed themselves over
Right.
and
They'll
over
just starve.
until they, yeah,
They'll starve.
they'll do it till they kill themselves. Yeah, so like
Right.
that mechanism, we're faulty as humans, and um that mechanism is within us all. But
Yeah.
in Matt's case, he can be a victim in this because it's like, well, I got shot and I had to be on these drugs for years. He didn't go out. He wasn't like, at the bar with his buddies buying pills on Saturday nights. He wasn't ever doing anything like that.
Actually, you're sort of right on with that, because I was not big into the bar
You're not
scene.
doing it recreationally. You're not.
I did not use alcohol or these opiates in a fun sense.
Yeah.
I I drank alcohol like almost in a medicinal sense, and I drank it with a purpose, and that was so that I could go to sleep. And I would drink a bottle of bourbon a night, drink it over the course of maybe 4 hours. And eventually I would get to the point where I would be so obliterated that finally I would just pass out and go to sleep. And that's how I sort of
He
lived
had
my
to drink
life.
to the point of disassociation,
Yeah, absolutely.
pretty much.
I guarantee you that my blood alcohol content was way above zero point 0.4. Like I guarantee you every night that I went to sleep, and that's on top of, the opiates
The pills,
that I was
yeah,
using, and the benzodiazepines that they were already giving me for work,
yeah. Wow, wow,
for
yeah,
from the VA. And so, like, I had like a completely lethal cocktail for most people. A bottle of bourbon, at least 150 milligrams of oxycontin, oxycodone, and then Ambien or
yeah.
um
This
yeah,
is what housewives do to delete themselves,
yeah, yes.
pretty much.
Uh, this will usually cause people to stop breathing and stop their heart from beating. Like that's like what happens. And I can only say that I'm here today because I had that higher power that was like looking out for me while I was going through this. I mean, literally, I mean, 17 years of doing this every night, Joe. Yeah, I didn't miss one
Yeah,
night that entire period from the time that I got out of the hospital until the VA finally sent me to treatment, residential treatment. I did not miss a night of using those substances in exactly the way that I'm describing. And then I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go to work as a teacher and teach math. And I would be hungover
yeah.
but that was normal to me.
And he's
That
better
was
than most of the
normal.
teachers now, anyways.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I would go in, and I'm absolutely certain of this because the amount of alcohol that I would drink, there wasn't ever a minute of the day where I wasn't either just coming down from the drunk last night or going back up because I was imbibing alcohol again. And I never drank at school. But when you're consuming hard alcohol in those amounts, I was
it
never
stays
sober when
with
I was there
you.
either.
Yeah,
Right? Yes.
it kind of stays, and the pills will kind
You
of,
can
make
you
it
you
last.
you have sort of I could put on the polished veneer of somebody who was sober-ish, but I
Yeah,
was never sober. And I was always under the influence of oxycontin and oxycodone. Those pills, especially oxycontin, the time release pills that I was using, they stay active for 8 hours. And
yeah,
you're taking 3 of those a day. There's never a minute that goes by where you're not under the influence
yeah.
of hardcore opiates.
Which is
Um,
basically the equivalent of like heroin almost.
yeah, no, it's actually
Pretty
a little bit worse
drugs.
than that. But yes, just so people have a rough idea. Um, and the ironic thing about this, we had talked about self-medication, self-medicating. The ironic thing is that um, because I was drinking like this, because I was self-medicating like this, I was never at a spot where I could actually acknowledge any of the things that really bother me to another person, right? I never talk about them. And when you don't acknowledge or grieve things that happen in life, you never move past them. I'm convinced that for those 17 years, I stayed stuck at day one coming back to America.
Yeah.
I stayed in the same footing that I got wounded in. Um, and I was never comfortable. I was always I've been diagnosed by my psychiatrist and psychologist as having a hypervigilance, which is a type of PTSD where you're never quite able to relax all the way. Do you know what I mean? You're always kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop. It's sort of like a very anxious state where you're hyper aware and paying very close attention. And this is what happens to men when they've been ambushed at close
Well,
range by machine guns.
you're also a peak performance type person. That's what they put you in there for. That's and stuff. So like those people, we always got to be we're not like women where we can just not be paying attention to anything and like,
Yeah, oblivious to the world.
oblivious to the world. Yeah. You're like, you know, just,
I'm
your level of
always
attention is 10x what someone else has, but that requires energy, effort, and stuff. And it's a survival mechanism. It's really a survival.
yes,
It's a good thing, is it's a survival mechanism. But when
but
you're
it's
teaching
hard to
class at
deal
high
with.
school, you don't need to be have your nervous system be turned on to a, like, war zone level.
Right. Right. And it gets exhausting, but you don't know what to do with that exhaustion. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not quite like you can take your boots off and chill out.
Yeah,
It really, the best you can do is the only thing that I knew how to do after work. I'd get off of work at 6 p.m. I mean, when I taught math in Milwaukee and Chicago and Indianapolis, I would be at the school for 12 hours. So I'd leave at I'd probably leave somewhere like around 6:45 to get to school. So 11 hours about, and then leave out of school at 6 p.m. After everything had been graded, everything is prepared for the next day. I'd leave out at 6 p.m. and then immediately I would start drinking. The first thing that I would do when I'd walk through that door is start downing 2 large glasses of bourbon, and then I'd go and get something to eat from a neighborhood restaurant or something, and I would just continue drinking like that. And that's, excuse my language, that's all she fucking wrote. I mean,
yeah,
that's how day in and day out, that's how I existed. Yeah, but that's not living. Do you know what I mean? That's merely existing, because it's almost like you have everything on cruise control. When you're getting that loaded every night and you're
yeah.
using opiates,
It's a little
it's
bit
like
of
a
booze control.
this is a very, hey, you're right on with that. And what you don't so I talked a little bit about self-medicating and why I did that, what that felt like. um uh I um I also said that it sort of keeps you from ever actually dealing with your issues in a more permanent way, right? So you're kind of like stuck in static. And this will go on. And at a certain point in my drinking, it really became very hopeless. I want to say, um, for about 5 years, I did not have any hope. I would come home from teaching and I would literally sit on the edge of my bed, and be drinking bourbon and be sitting there cradling my 1911 in my hands, and just thinking, is today the day? Do you know what I'm saying? And
Because you
the
felt it was the only other
well,
logical
it's
escape.
it's like the only real oscillations or differences that occurred in my life was either when I was drinking or not drinking, and
Yeah,
that's the only thing that you really notice. And at a certain point in time, it like in I think that this for me was sort of right away. It's not fun anymore. Do you know what I mean? You're not doing it because you want to do it. You're doing it now because you have to do it, because you don't know another way to live your life. And I did not know another way to really go to sleep at night. And so, like when getting drunk or recovering from the prior night's drunk are the two ways that your life is perforated. Every day becomes like Groundhog Day, and that's where the hopelessness comes in, because it doesn't look like there's an end to it. Do you know what I'm saying? Um, and the people at the VA, my doctors and my nurses, um, they stayed right with me, but they knew the how dangerous and how they knew the position that I was in. They knew how unhealthy I was. They had a very good idea of what my daily life looked like. And as my all-star drinking career sort of started to come to an end, I began to have more physical problems in my body. I began to get admitted to the hospital almost every other weekend. The sheriff where I lived, he was another veteran, and I didn't even know that at the time. But he would come to my door and take his vest off and his gun, so that I didn't interpret him as a threat. And he'd say, "Get in my fucking car." And he'd drive me down to the VA. He did not know what else to do. The VA did not know what else to do. All they could do was admit me to a locked unit, sober me up. And as soon as I was released, what do you think I was doing? Drinking.
Getting your brain wet. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I go immediately right. I would pick booze up coming out of the hospital on my way home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was no learning that was taking place. There was no recognition that there was a problem. It was just, a set of car accidents that my life had become. And I was just, managing my way, finding my way through them.
These traumatic experiences create what's called a psychosomatic illness. So the emotions and things in your mind begin affecting the body. So in a way to try to heal them, you're trying to numb that pain and emotions and everything. And like, you can't, eventually you start to see like, I can only, you can only do that so long.
Right.
But the monster's still under the bed. You can only,
Yes.
you can only do it so long before you have to say, like, there's got to be a different way of dealing with it, because the drinking is easy, cheap way that works. Well, it works, temporarily, because it seems like a quick fix. You're like, well, instead of, dealing with this or understanding part of it, and whatnot, it's a nice warm blanket that you can put on, and then it temporarily goes away. And a lot of people do this for all sorts of things, let alone like the stuff that he had to deal with. He's not just dealing with kind of like a shitty divorce, he's dealing with, really heavy stuff. So in fact, so let's call that the end of the beginning part, and let's talk about how you recovered. But since we're at the 1 hour mark, I want to introduce, I don't know if you've heard this, Matt. I think you might enjoy it. We're going to do a quick little mini music break here, but I think you guys are going to like this, and people can take a piss and whatnot. And we're going to get into how you got out of it, and the recovery aspect, and how we that part.
We've
so that
come to know each other. That kind of to that, right?
Say that again.
So you want to talk about me getting hospitalized, treatment, recovery, sobriety, and then all the way up to how I met you through AJ's show.
Yeah, it doesn't really even have to include me. You can if you want, but this is supposed to be about you. But I think you're gonna like this, and I think this will be cool. Like when I go to make this back, I'm gonna have to edit this part out. But I think this might actually be dope. So we're gonna put this in. If you need to take a piss or something like that, go ahead, do it. And I think because this is what Matt had to sort of. Well, he was drinking because he got shot and everything too. It's not the pain from the injury. It's also the things that you had to experience and the responsibility that you had. And I think this will kind of speak to it. I think you're actually going to like this a lot too. So we're going to try this.
Yep. For me, one of the most impactful lessons that I learned from war was in the spring of 2006 in the city of Ramadi, Iraq, which at the time was the epicenter of the insurgency, where brutal and determined terrorists ruled the streets with torture and rape and murder. And it was in one neighborhood of that city during an operation that I was in charge of when all hell broke loose. We had multiple units out on the battlefield fighting the enemy. We had friendly Iraqi soldiers, we had U.S. Army soldiers and U.S. Marines, along with small elements of my SEAL team. And then the fog of war rolled in with its confusion and chaos and mayhem, and with its gunfire and enemy attacks and screaming men and blood and death. And in that fog of war, through a series of mistakes and human error and poor judgment and Murphy's Law and just plain bad luck, a horrendous firefight broke out. But this firefight, it wasn't between us and the enemy. This firefight, tragically, was between us and us. Friendly forces against friendly forces. Fratricide, the mortal sin of combat. And the most horrific part of war. And when it was over, and the fog of war lifted, one friendly Iraqi soldier was dead, 2 more were wounded, one of my men was wounded, the rest of my SEALs were badly shaken. And it was only through a miracle that no one else was killed. And it was reported up the chain of command what had happened. That we had fought and wounded and killed each other. And when we got back to base, things didn't get much better. There was a message waiting for me from my commanding officer. And it said, shut down all operations. It said that the commanding officer, the master chief, and the investigating officer were inbound to my location. And they told me to prepare a debrief to explain exactly what had happened on the operation and what had gone wrong. Now, I knew what this meant. It meant that somebody had to pay. Somebody had to be held accountable. Somebody had to get fired for what had happened. So, I began to prepare my debrief. And in it, I detailed every mistake that was made and who made it. And I pointed out every failure in the planning and the preparation and the execution in the operation. And I pointed out who was responsible for that failure. There was plenty of blame to go around. There were so many people that I could incriminate with guilt. But something wasn't right. For some reason, I just couldn't put my finger on who was at fault and who specifically I should blame for what had happened. And I sat and I went over it again and again, and I struggled for an answer. And then, when I was about 10 minutes from starting the debrief, that answer came, and it hit me like a slap in the face. And I realized that there was only one person to blame for the confusion, only one person to blame for the wounded men, and only one person to blame for the dead Iraqi soldier. And I knew exactly who that person was. And with that knowledge, I walked into the debriefing room with my commanding officer and the investigating officer were sitting there waiting for me, along with the rest of my men. And I stood up before them and I asked them one simple question. Whose fault was this? One of my SEALs raised his hand, and he said it was my fault. I didn't keep control of the Iraqi soldiers I was with. And I said, no, it wasn't your fault. And then another SEAL raised his hand and said it was my fault. I didn't pass our location over the radio fast enough, so no one knew what building we were in, and that's what caused all this confusion. It was my fault. And I said, no, it wasn't your fault either. And then another SEAL raised his hand, and he said, boss, this was my fault. I didn't properly identify my target, and I shot and killed that friendly Iraqi soldier. This was my fault. And I said, no, this wasn't your fault either. And it wasn't yours or yours or yours, I said as I pointed to the rest of the SEALs in the room. And then I told them that there was only one person at fault for what had happened. There was only one person to blame. And that person was Akira.
Motherfucker, sorry, I put my hand on the fucking keyboard, son of a bitch. Hang on, let's complete that. Sorry, guys. What motherfucker? Sorry about that, guys. I just lost the whole fucking page. Damn it.
Well, I can talk a little bit about what that
well,
man
I was going to say that you had to experience similar things like that, and I can see why that would make someone, drink and feel guilty and shit after. Not guilt, analyze it endlessly.
Yes. Yes. Especially when you get out of theater. You're no longer in the country. That's when that stuff really starts to come back and haunt you.
That's what my point was. Fuck. I put my hand on my laptop and hit the little, not the keyboard mouse thing. Fuck. Oh well. But I was going to say you had to deal with things like that, and that you'd be a sociopath if it didn't bother you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you overanalyze it and stuff like that. You're in similar situations to that, and you're responsible for people, and in a leadership position,
and also, like the Army is very institutional about assigning blame. And what the person, I believe that he was a SEAL, was talking about when he was going around the room, and these people were popping up, his teammates.
Then he was going to say it was him.
I was responsible because
exactly.
I did this. That very much is the culture inside of the Army. When you do something wrong, the best play is not to hide it, because that is an indictment all of its own. Admitting your guilt actually shows a certain amount of integrity and honor,
ownership.
and an understanding of accountability. But what I want to say about like what he was talking about, the firefight that he got into, imagine like you're engaging an enemy militia of irregulars. So these are not uniformed soldiers that you're fighting. This is a ragtag group of civilians who've armed themselves, and they're engaging your unit, and there are 60 or 80 of them in a large element, and you begin engaging them from one direction, right? And fighting through them in this direction, and an allied unit begins doing the same thing from another unit. Do you know how easy it is for your unit and elements of your unit to begin exchanging fire with friendly forces, because you're shooting at muzzle flashes? That's what you're shooting at. You're many times in these combat environments,
like chess in the dark,
right? Many of these in urban combat, you're guys are not popping out full silhouette, right? and presenting you with their
Here
full
I
face
am.
and their full
Yeah.
shoulders, right? They're not doing that. You're on a two-way rifle range, right? Um, you're seeing muzzle flashes. That's the thing that will stick out in people's minds more than anything. And you know what? Your own team and elements in your own force make their own muzzle flashes. If you have a group of U.S. soldiers that's engaging the same unit from the opposite side, you're seeing their muzzle flashes too.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to understand or try and ferret out that they're not shooting at you. They're shooting at people that, you know, are 15 degrees off of where you are.
Exactly.
It's going to
yeah.
look like they're shooting directly at you.
Yeah.
And
But
it's going to be very difficult to tell the difference at night when there's dust and the exhaust gases from your weapons, and Shamal storms kicking up. All of these things are a factor, and it becomes very, very easy to misidentify your target.
Well, the I can't believe I fucked that up because it that kind of sucks. But the point that I was going to try to make is, you know, as you just said, it's very easy for something like that to happen, no matter what your intention is. You're going to, of course, you're going to, well, I didn't intend to do it. Well, it happened. Imagine if you killed the wrong person, or so. I could imagine someone drinking for 17 years after that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can imagine somebody who gives a shit that affecting them. You know, maybe not drinking for 17. You know, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's a justification a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not justifying how you dealt with it, but I'm justifying, like, I think I would probably do that. And I think a lot of people in here would do it. It sounds easy to, like, oh, well, you know, I would just go to therapy right away and stuff. No, you probably wouldn't. You probably would not. You'd be embarrassed about it, or, you know, a whole range of emotions. And I could see someone drinking and maybe even taking their own life, because they'd be like, well, I took someone's life that I shouldn't have. So, like, maybe this is the way to make it right. And that's just one incident.
Right.
Those incidents happen every day, probably. Not as dramatic as that, but
right.
You know, smaller scale things. But it's not like you're just playing tiddlywinks out there. You could have messed something up, and now they're in a wheelchair the rest of their life.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, it should fuck with somebody to the point where they're going to drink. I'm not saying that's the way to handle it, but I'm saying that it, you know, I think you get the point of what the weight of it is. A lot. It's not like this is not like you messed up someone's package at Amazon. This is like you could cripple them, you kill them.
There's no Nintendo reset button when you pull a trigger. Those bullets don't come back, and you cannot go to the store and ask for a refund. They leave your gun, and whatever happens. And that's the consequence. And what that man was talking about was called a blue on blue incident, right? Technically, his was a blue on green, where he engaged an allied Iraqi soldier. Or somebody in his unit did, right? And that's just those incidents, they happen in war. You have to also remind yourself, you know, most of the people that are in uniform, most of the people that were in my unit, you know, they were, you know, 23, 24, 25 years old, just coming out of puberty and becoming like an adult, right?
Yeah.
An adult man. This and that's the more professional side of it. More conventional.
And they're scared.
Right. The younger
they learn how to deal with the fear, but, you know, like,
right.
they're in a fear-inducing environment. We're not saying they're scared, like saying they're weak or not trained well or something like that, but, like, there should be an element of fear because you can lose your life and you're taking other people's lives and the guy next to you
Definitely
can
in the
die
more
and all that.
conventional units. Definitely in the more conventional units. Absolutely. In the more elite units, where I came from, when you deal with people that have been in the units, where I was, fear engenders an aggression, not a hesitation or a retreat, right? And you're specifically like trained in this in combat. There's a reason why you have to go through airborne school on your way to becoming an airborne sapper or a ranger, or in the Green Berets, the Special Forces. And that is, you have to learn to master fear, and airborne school is where that begins. Because when you're up in that airplane, and they're doing a a hey-ho or a halo, those are two different operations. And you walk to the back of the ramp on the airplane, and it's flying, a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles up, and your brain, your eyes see what's going on, and your brain interprets. The brain stem, the more animal part of us, takes a look at that cargo ramp on the aircraft that you're on, says, like hell, I'm going to jump off of that. Are you fucking crazy? Right? I mean, this is like, the reaction where it's like, you're looking at death, right? Because you're jumping out of a vehicle traveling, 100 some miles an hour, 3 miles above the earth, and you're relying on this, flimsy silk parachute to break your fall. And it's training and a specific mentality that they engender to help you deal with fear. And you deal with fear by confronting it. That's why being a soldier or a Marine, that's why that's categorically different from many other professions, because fear is something that you have to train yourself to confront and overcome. And that's where you get the confidence to actually do things proficiently on the battlefield. That's the path that professionalism, that's how you create it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not innate. You have to go through a certain set of experiences that they generate in training, where you start to feel proficient in environments that would terrify other people.
Yeah.
And that gives you the confidence to do sometimes the unthinkable. I talk about this at AA. When I talk to people who are just coming into the AA program, I tell them to jump with both feet, like you're leaving that cargo ramp on that airplane. It's not like, if you're on that cargo ramp and you're getting ready to, jump off the back of it, it's not like you can shimmy down to the end of the cargo ramp and stick one foot over the side and sort of, inch
You're
your
not getting
way
into a pool. Yeah.
No, the wind is going to grab you and pull you right off the ramp, and you're going to be doing the funky chicken in the air and somersaulting all over the place. And you probably will pass out and die because you won't be awake to pull your parachute. You know what I'm saying? So what I tell them at AA is when it comes to recovery, jump with both feet. I tell them, I know that you've been using substances to self-medicate. And I know that I'm asking you to do the unthinkable. I know that I'm asking you to put your faith in something that hasn't been demonstrated to you before. But you're looking. But I tell them, when you look around this room and you see the other people here who have 5 years, 6 years of sobriety, all of those people made that soft landing with that parachute in recovery, so to speak. All of those people, they jumped with both feet, and it turned out better than they could ever imagine. And that's how that is how recovery was for me. I got sent during COVID into residential treatment at through the VA, sorry, and spent 43 days in residential treatment. I'd never been to like a residential treatment center before. I've never been like to any of that, AA, nothing. Um, and
Was it because you didn't want to go, or they had to finally really force you?
they had
I
to
remember
sort of
you said
force
they
me.
kind of forced you. Yeah.
They had to sort of force me. I was, like I said, before we went to break, I was going in and out of the ER at the VA, like every other weekend. I probably was admitted 23 times, and every single time it had something to do with alcohol. Every single time. Um, and finally, my doctor said, you're going to do this or you're going to die.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be consequences that I may happen to you. These are consequences that's going to happen if you continue doing what you're doing. You're getting arrested by the police. You're brought into the ER weekend after weekend, sometimes week after week. You're brought down here by the police. They could arrest you and throw you in jail at any one of these times. And they don't do that. They bring you to us. So now I want you to do us the favor and do the 30 days at treatment. And I want you to do this. Because I don't know how to do anything else. I don't know how to help you. But this will at least give your body a chance to heal from the damage that you're doing. And I went along with it. I had so damaged the relationships with my family, with everybody. I lost all of my friends. I didn't maintain any contacts with anybody. I was completely alone. And I mean that. I was completely alone. I was isolated. I can't tell you how lonely that feels. So I went to treatment, and I realized, probably a week into getting sober, it was only allowing those things to finally cycle completely out of my body. It was only after that first week or two in treatment that I realized how much alcohol actually diminished me, how much it actually, because I had been habitually using it for so long, how much it actually took away from my intellect, from my emotions, how funny I could be naturally. When you're using a central nervous depressant like alcohol, it like turns the volume on life way down. It's that numbing thing, right?
Yeah, didn't you say it like numbs your central nervous system to like, so it can only be at 70% or
right? Yes,
with 30%?
it
Can you talk
changes
about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a central nervous depressant depresses the transmission in your synapses. Your what your ears hear, what your body feels. There's a chemical signal that's sent up your spinal cord and is received in the brain, right? When you're a habitual alcoholic, the strength of that signal is diminished severely by the byproducts that metabolize when you're metabolizing alcohol. Those things act as almost blocks for the transmission of those signals. And that's why, like, people that are very drunk, like, you'll see somebody slap a drunk guy and then they'll react like 30 seconds later.
Yeah.
That's what's going on, right? Only in my case, it was more of that I did not feel the gamut of normal emotions. I can probably think in those 17 years that I was drinking, I probably genuinely laughed to myself maybe 6 or 7 times the entire time.
Wow.
I did not feel glad or happy. Those emotions were almost completely absent. The only emotions, when I would feel emotion, the only thing that I would feel is a great deal of depression, sadness, anger, and frustration. Those are really the only emotions that I had any kind of real sensation of. And that's because of, things like humor are some of the most complex, right, of our emotions. Happiness, joy. These are very, very complex emotions where a lot goes into actually generating them organically, right? And when you're using alcohol, that higher level of emotions, you're largely cut off from that. You don't experience those things, or it takes an awful lot for you to experience those things. And again, I'm speaking as somebody who wasn't just an alcoholic. I'm speaking as somebody who
Opioids
was
too.
dependent on opiates as well, and that has its own set of effects. That contributes very much to what I'm saying. So I'm speaking I'm speaking of this from the perspective of somebody who is dealing with a dependency on both things. And so I went through I did the 30 days
So
as my
44
doctor.
days, I think you said.
Yep,
Stayed a little
and I
later.
stayed for 43 days.
Okay.
And then I was released. And what I treatment people think that like the residential treatment, right? Sending people there is some kind of fix, and it's not. It is a a break from your habitual using of substances where you're kept under observation, you have access to medical care. If you go into
Can
or
withdraw
if
properly.
you yeah, right.
Yeah.
And they use drugs to they use things like gabapentin and different types of muscle relaxers. Many of these are non-narcotic in nature. They use these things to deal with the side effects of coming down or withdrawing from alcohol or opiates, or in my case, both. And that's really what residential treatment is. It is a period of time where you're kept under observation for almost 24 hours. And people they're pretty sure. I'm sure that there are people who cheat, but people are relatively sure that you're not using while you're there, right?
Yeah.
Because you're living there, you're under observation, blah blah blah. The most valuable thing that happened to me at treatment was not any of the actual programming that they did. It was me going to AA group meetings every night after our programming had gotten done for the day and we ate. I would go to an AA meeting every night at around 7:30, and meet people who were not in residential treatment, meet people who were alcoholics and were drug addicts, but they were in recovery. They were sober. They were out in the real world. They were living. They had families and responsibilities and all of these other things. And they were coming to these meetings, not because they were mandated to be there, but because they wanted to be there. And when I got introduced to these people, I was sort of, I didn't know how to interpret that, right? Like it doesn't make sense to somebody who's an alcoholic or a drug addict. Like what is this support group bullshit? Like, why are you people showing up here on a perfectly good night when you could be down at the bar? The truth is that we're a very social species, and we need interconnection. We need to be talking to each other. I mean, look at the internet and look at all of the different ways that we have developed the internet into connecting the way that you and I have, right? That's how we are as a species, and we need that. Pathology grows in isolation. Every single person who has a habitual drinking problem or drug problem, they're all very alone. They're all very isolated because those substances have largely taken the place of regular human interaction with those people.
Well, that stimulation takes place of the stimulation they would get from people and regular interactions, and they can also kind of like, closet drink. And closet drinking is the best drinking because you're kind of like doing it to cope. I shouldn't say the best drinking, but the kind that people want to do the most, where they kind of hide it.
Yep.
It seems to be the most valuable. And now, why did you tend to resonate more with the AA treatment than the quote programming and the programs that were the in-house.
I think that as a species, we learn by watching each other, right? When we're trying to learn a new thing, we learn that new thing best by watching somebody else do it. And like talking to people who are in treatment, and who are sober for the first time, maybe in their adult lives. Talking to them about sobriety is like the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, they're
These
not
are people
seasoned
who
at it. Yeah,
these are people who don't know
yeah,
what the hell
and
they're
some of
doing
them
anyway.
are scum, anyways. You know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
They are. They're kind of like, what I'm saying. Like they
Uh,
didn't come from a circumstance that you did, but some of them really are kind of scum. I'll be kind of
yes.
honest. They're just kind
Uh,
of be drug addicts. Like the court made them go there or something like that. Some of them are scum, and they're not at a higher level of where you want to be yet. So I guess I definitely see that part because you feel like you're almost like not
well, you're
elevating yourself in a sense because you're not
uh,
around people who are living that. They're people who are just, or they're maybe living it and want to do it, but they haven't done it long enough yet. The other people kind of are living it more, and they want to do it. The other people are just, sometimes there's those people are scum.
right. You can have people that don't have good intentions
They don't
in
give a shit.
anything,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's disproportionately common in a residential treatment program. Don't listen to anything any of those people have to say about sobriety because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. If
yeah.
they
And
knew
they
what
were
they were
just
talking
robbing
about,
houses
they
last
wouldn't
year.
be there.
Yeah, yeah. They were
You know
just
what I
robbing
mean?
houses a few months ago. Now they're teaching you.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like so that was really that was what made me connect with the people in AA is that they really they didn't just say a thing. They did their best to live that thing, to do that thing, to embody that thing.
For
And
years.
so yeah.
Yeah.
And there are people that relapse in AA all the time. It's not a foolproof program. The program is only as good as the effort that you're willing to put into it, right? If you give a shit effort, you're going to get shit results, right? I mean, it's like that with everything in life. That's also why I referenced that airborne story before, is because again, this is not something that you go into half will, right?
Yeah.
You don't say, well, I'm going to listen to this but not listen to that because that's sort of inconvenient and I don't like that. No. You got to go into this full tilt. Do you know what I mean? You're going to listen and get the program down and get things running in your life before you can start saying what you need and what you don't. Demonstrate a proficiency in sobriety, and then you can start making decisions and determining things for yourself once you have the program up and running the way that it's supposed to be. So you've got a sponsor, you're doing the steps, you're going to meetings, you're not drinking at night, all of these
Yeah.
things. And
Now, what was your sponsorship relationship with? Like, how did that work out?
So I started off with a guy who had 20 years of sobriety, who was the secretary of my meeting, and he was another teacher from the Milwaukee area. I got along very well with him, and we connected very well because we had that common professional experience of both being teachers in the same school district.
Okay.
And so we could really relate to each other on the different things and bullshit that we've seen teaching at the high school level in Milwaukee. And that was like one of the things that that made that really facilitated a lot of the communication between the two of us. We spoke in similar tongues. When I described to him where I had taught and he described to me the different schools where he had taught, we knew right away where each other was coming from. He just like how I said that, when I would go to work in the morning. And I would be,
You want to know what kind of people he was teaching? It was like this. A certain type of watermelon enthusiast kids.
yeah. Yeah, that's not a lie. But he was a good starting block, and we kept our. I still keep in contact with him to this day. He about 2 years into my sobriety, he had to move out of the area and go and take care of his parents, who came down with dementia and Alzheimer's. And so he is doing that, and he's going to meetings where he stays now. But I got a different sponsor, and I, that's the guy that I talk to now. And I've got nearly 5 years of sobriety, and I can tell you, my life is 100% better in every single category. There's nothing that I miss about alcohol. There's nothing that I miss about opiates. It's
Now,
it's
were
a
there
very
times where you had to call him where you felt you had a craving or something
early
like
on.
that?
Early on, once I got past, like, I want to say, once I got past 6 months, I didn't have to think about it every day. And once I got to to the year, like, I stopped going to meetings every night at 7:30. For maybe the
so you were
first,
going every single night?
yes, every night
You
I
went
would
every
go.
single night, no matter what.
Yes, if I could sit in my car and get there, I went. Because I looked at the AA meetings as sort of like, if I was a cancer patient, that was my oncology treatment. That's what kept the illness at bay. And that approach worked for me. I went every day, and I got used to seeing the same people on the same nights for a year, and created connections with those people, did stuff with them outside of the program. Many of them I introduced to shooting. And I would take them to the gun range. And I, get to know their families. The point that I'm trying to make is it is us fomenting relationships with each other in the program that becomes the positive coping mechanism, where we once used alcohol and drugs as a negative coping mechanism in our lives. Because it was those people who taught me when and where and how to talk about the actual experiences that I had in Iraq. Like, I didn't know that there was a positive there was a positive result that would come out of talking about those things, acknowledging those things, bringing them up, admitting them to other people. Before I went into treatment, when I was still drinking, I would lie to people and say that I was in the Army, but I never got deployed. Because I didn't want to have to put up with their questions. And you talked earlier in our discussion about a monster being under the bed, and that's what those experiences, that's how you think about them. For me, what those experiences and not talking about them felt like a weight on my shoulders, like an 80-pound rucksack that I carried around every day.
Yeah.
That's how that felt. And when I learned about how to talk about them and to who, right? It was like a liberating experience. It changed my life. It really did. I'll tell you a funny story. Before I went into treatment, I went to my psychiatrist and psychology meetings at the VA. Do you know what I talked to my my psychologist for? Do you know what I talked to that man about for 4 years?
Probably like bullshit.
Close. German World War II tank design. I'm not joking. I'm not kidding.
So
you.
anything anything to not
but
talk
the
about the real
thing,
shit.
right?
Yeah.
Anything but the thing that I was actually there to talk to him about. And I when I got
And
sober,
he didn't give a shit. He's getting
no,
paid.
no,
He
because
doesn't
he's
give a
seen
shit.
this before. He's seen this before. He's been through this before. Absolutely. He said that when I went in there and brought that up to him and apologized to him, for wasting his time for all of those years. And he's like, Matt, you weren't wasting your time. You were biding your time. And you, and I've
Did he
had
ever
this
try to
happen.
really force it out of you and just say, "Hey, let's stop the bullshit and get into the just
I would shut
get
down the
into it"?
meetings. I'd get
So
up
you would
and
just
leave.
okay.
Yep.
So
Um,
he was trying.
Occasionally he would try and do that, but then when I would react that way, he would just stop. So he would probably try and force the
He was kind of reading the room and kind of knew
yeah.
like that you
He
have
would,
to only you can do it when you're ready.
yeah, and that's what his experience was. He still keeps that that book that we started to read together by Erwin Rommel. He still keeps that on his desk as a keepsake of of our history with each other. He still has that book on his desk and references that to the other people that he sees, that this is a common tactic.
Yeah.
That many veterans engage in. They will come to
Delay,
say that they went
deny,
to their
defect,
meeting.
or
Right.
deflect, or
They
whatever. Yeah.
right. They will say that they attend their meetings with their psychiatrist or psychologist.
So
but
it sounds good and like, yeah, I'm doing all the stuff I
exactly.
should be, but they're not really doing the real work, which probably is very difficult at first.
Right. It's very counterproductive.
Yeah.
It's like the same type of thing where people will start going to AA meetings, not because they want to get sober, but because they want to escape the consequences of their drinking with their
Yeah.
spouse. Right. So they'll
Yeah.
say, well, look, I'm working on this.
Yeah.
But then they're going home after the
Yeah.
meetings after not
Hashtag
really
marriage
saying
counseling.
anything.
Yeah.
Right. You see the same behavior. They don't really say anything in the meetings. They pass when it comes their time
Yeah.
to talk.
Yeah.
And then they leave out the meeting and go to the bar.
Yeah.
That's the behavior of somebody who was
Yeah.
engaging in the exact who is doing exactly what I'm saying. They're looking to attend AA and be seen attending AA, but they're not really. They're not really
You got to be
digesting.
vulnerable in it. Yeah. So Matt had told me that you could do AA meetings online, and I was kind of over the winter. I was struggling with some alcohol and depression, and a few other things that were not even alcohol related, but that the alcohol was a coping mechanism for it. And I think I did like one or two AA meetings, but like I immediately got involved right away. Did I want to? Not really, but it's kind of a waste of time if you don't go and get involved and get vulnerable.
Right.
You kind of have to say like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I think this is why I'm doing it, and you got to I think I did that, and I was able to stop drinking for like 30 days, and I completely changed my like relationship to alcohol. I don't use it as like a coping mechanism and all this other stuff. So I'm much more healthy because I did that, and I know that I have the outlet to use again. But you got to go in like jump with both feet, like Matt was saying. You're either gonna you're just gonna go there to say you go there. Or like if not, like what are you really doing? You got to go there. In fact, I would say to some like maybe go once and just observe what people say. But if you go there and don't speak, it's kind of a little bit of a waste of time if you need help because you gotta. That vulnerability is the only way that you kind of can get real with it. It's really to get real with yourself. It's not really
Right.
getting real with the other people there. It's getting real with yourself, and you got to
It's
kind
to be
of
honest with
talk
yourself.
about it and elaborate it. Yeah, and just say like, hey, I don't really want to say the reason I was drinking a lot more because it was just kind of a personal thing I don't need to share here. But I was using it as a escaping coping mechanism thing. And then once I kind of went in and I talked about more the fact that I was using it as an escaping coping mechanism thing. And I saw and I'll be honest, I saw some of the people in there that more were like at the beginning lower level, and I was like, and again, this is my experience. I was like, wow, like I'm not as bad as that, but I don't want to be where these people are. So like
Exactly.
it can scare you. It actually scared me a little bit. I was like, they are cooked. So like, so which I would never say that to them. Right? You know, you got to be respectful and everything. But it's like, well, that you like it can always get kind of worse. So
Yeah.
if you're doing okay, you better try to preserve that and understand what's going on here and stuff. But
There's
this is really more about Matt. But I am trying to say, like, if you're gonna go with these meetings and stuff, like, get involved and do it. Speak. You know, speak. Be vulnerable. Trust the process. Trust that the people are not going to judge you. And you know, you gotta. If you're not being honest with that, it's all of it is doing it for yourself. You know, it's you're not there to try to give them a good story or something like that. You're there to do it for you.
right.
But you need them as kind of a sounding board, and you need to like publicly admit, hey, I'm fucking up, and I'm choosing to fuck up all the time, and you know, not take responsibility for this other factor that is fueling the drinking. Is one example of it. So Matt was able to help me with that. Like I wasn't as bad like but you get I guess one of the things that I took away from it, you can see how bad some other people have it. They were like drunk driving with kids in their own car, taking money from like their kids' piggy bank to go buy liquor and stuff like that. To be honest, hearing some of those bad stories made me feel like way better and be like, well, I can clean this up a little bit. This isn't that bad compared to them. So like,
Yeah, I want to share
which
like an idea.
sounds kind of shitty, but honestly, that did help me a lot.
I want to share like an idea that I even wrote a post on. I do like an X account for people that are just interested in exploring the 12-step AA program. And we'll plug that later on. But I just did a post where my sponsor now was talking about this, and he likened you know, like a regular drinker becoming an alcoholic to like a cucumber going through the pickling process and becoming a pickle. No one knows when a regular
pickle. Yeah.
When a regular person, what they call a normie, goes from being just a normie with positive control and you know, decisions being made in stopping alcohol once it's they've started drinking, and all of that, like normal consumption, right? Where they're not doing it every day, they're not doing excessive amounts. It's not a problem, and then it grows into a problem, right? And they become an alcoholic. Nobody can point out on a specific day.
And then you're really in a pickle.
Right? Yeah. Nobody can determine the day that a normie changes into an alcoholic.
Yeah,
and the person themselves, they don't know that.
Yeah.
But once
they won't admit it to themselves because it's such a gradual.
Right.
thing.
It's like a frog in a pot of water, and it's being on a burner, right? The frog will jump out of boiling water, but it will sit in water that's not boiling until that water boils, and it will boil to death. And it's because of incrementalism, right? But going back to the pickling analogy, nobody knows when a normie becomes an alcoholic. Nobody can point out that day. Just like nobody can point out exactly when a cucumber goes from being a cucumber to a pickle, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows. But once you're a pickle,
hold on,
Joe. I just want to finish this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Once you become a pickle, you cannot go back to becoming a cucumber. Once you're an alcoholic, you are an alcoholic. And this experience is universal. This is something that people have a really hard time getting their heads around. You cannot go back to it. You can't delude yourself. If you're an alcoholic like I was, I cannot have one. and I'm not going to
Yeah.
risk that. Do you think that there's anything in having one drink that's worth me risking going back to using habitually alcohol again? Do you think that there's anything about that one drink that entices me to that would ever offset all of the work that I've done to be sober for 5 years?
Well, there's no need to open Pandora's box, and you
Right,
have such a good
exactly. Why
pattern
take the
going.
risk?
Yeah.
Like
Well, another thing too, but on another note too, you're not trying to escape anything.
I'm dealing with my
Yeah,
problems.
which I'm not
dealing.
saying drink or something, but I'm saying like you're not trying to escape anything the way that you were before.
Right.
Which is nice because people do drink as a reprieve from stress. That's
Yes.
why they do it.
But when that
but
becomes
that can
a
get out of hand
problem,
really quick.
right? When that becomes a problem, it becomes a problem that you might start drinking for some small issue in your life, and that's that. But eventually, if you keep doing that, the drinking itself will eclipse the problem that you're using it to solve or get relief from. Right?
Yeah.
The drinking becomes the problem in your life, and this is universally how the disease of alcoholism works. This is how substance abuse works in our biology. I have AA provided me with a permanent solution that's not a temporary chemical one. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't feel the need to get wildly screwed up every night in order to go to sleep.
Yeah.
I don't have to rely on substances. None of them. I have not had one drink since I got sober, and I've not used one narcotic drug. Nice. From the VA prescription or from a street pharmacist.
Nice.
Nothing. I don't have it does not have a place in my life. My life has become very much more enjoyable and much more human since I've gotten sober. And I feel like I finally started being able to live my life since I got wounded in Iraq. And that's like sort of my testimony about that. I don't have any desire to go back to the way that I was living my life when I was drinking and using opiates. There was nothing about that was rewarding. It was suffering and painful.
But it's also you change the paradigm in a lot of ways because you've made your body better. You dealt with the demons in the skeletons in the closet, and all those other things too.
Yeah, so I'm no longer carrying around that weight every day, Joe.
You don't see it as a you don't need to numb.
No.
And don't want to.
No, I'm not shying away from anything that I've done. I go to my I have very productive meetings with my psychologist and my psychiatrist. Both of them have written papers that feature me and my treatment record in saying, listen, this was a guy that the VA, every single time that I was admitted to the VA hospital, it cost the taxpayers between $50,000 and $95,000 every single time I was admitted to that hospital. Do you know how many times I've been admitted to that hospital since I got sober? 0.
You said you were going like every weekend before, though, like
right,
like when you're in the act of addiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they talk about that. They talk about that not only in a cost savings way, right? They talk about that in purely a healthcare and a concern for me way. And they've written papers about it, attesting to it. And that gets into some of the letter that I wrote to this congressman discussing that kind of gets into that letter that I wrote to my federal congressman about structural issues in the VA system and how federal policy stands in the way of the VA being able to deal with substance abuse in the veteran population. When guys get injured, they get put on these drugs, and if you stay on Oxycontin or oxycodone for more than a year,
you're cooked. Yeah, you're
like
cooked.
you
Yeah.
stay on it for a month, 60% of the
A
people,
couple weeks for some people, they're
well,
full
yeah,
blown.
60% of the people will develop a dependency or an addiction to it, a physical one,
Yeah,
because that's always in your system while you're using it,
yeah,
24 hours a day. So you stay on that drug for 3 months, 90% of the people will become addicted, dependent. Like 100% after a year or two. 100% of the people are dependent. There's 0% of the people who can use that medication and not develop a dependency
yeah,
or an addiction to it.
yeah.
And yeah, I shared with Joe, just so that you guys understand what I'm referencing. I shared with him the letter that I sent to my congressman, bringing up some of the key factors of my experience as a veteran who dealt with substance abuse and suicide. And I wrote him a very detailed letter about how federal policy sabotages the VA's effort to effectively deal with veteran substance abuse and suicide. When it comes to veterans, and this is something that I'm very passionate about, when it comes to veterans, there's no way to detach substance abuse from the 6,000 veterans who commit suicide every year. I'm going to say that again. 6,000 of our American service personnel who serve overseas come back home. 6,000 of them a year commit suicide. That is like 9/11 happening twice to this very, very small subsection in
It's basically like
American
one guy
culture.
in every single town in America or something.
Well, I mean, the numbers, they stand on their own. And part of the reason why this issue is so hard to confront is because it's not just a front-faced issue. What I'm about to say, 0 of these veterans were not also contending with a substance abuse problem. All of them have substance abuse problems. It is only in the darkness of drug dependency and alcoholism that suicide becomes tenable as an option. It is only when you're at the end of the road and you've lost all hope and your life turns into what mine was when I was drinking, that suicide starts to look like an attractive option, a reasonable one. And that's why I started writing our representatives, because I want them very much to change this federal policy so that AA is brought more into the fold when it comes to the VA. They have very, very specifically, if I'm going to talk about policy for a second, not to get overcomplicated about it or anything.
Yeah, what would you
but
ideally have happen that you think is a realistic thing that can
they
be done?
they have a non-religious preference for 12-step programs, and this policy is sort of it's geared so that no one group feels excluded, right? So that if you have a faith-based program that's Christian in nature, that Muslims don't feel excluded from it, right? That's the thinking behind this policy. But this policy is not born in recovery from these substances. And AA is not like a denominational faith-based organization. There actually is no attachment, no direct attachment to Christianity, to Judaism, to Islam, or to any of the other religions. All that they ask you to do is accept that there is a higher power, and they leave it ambiguous like that for a reason. That's how they phrase things in the program. I would like to see our policies when it comes to the VA, the direction given to the VA that excludes this atheistic view recovery, because that policy does not come from a recovery centered. It's not, that policy isn't written with recovery from substance abuse and suicide. It's not geared towards that. That policy is it has another direction and another agenda to it. I am moving in the direction of recovery from substance abuse, and by effectively addressing substance abuse, you will also address suicide amongst our veterans.
Yeah,
it's a 1-to-1. If somebody is not habitually engaging in drinking and substance abuse, and they manage to get sober, their chances for suicide drop exponentially. There have been 0 veterans who have committed suicide.
So it's a cofactor.
Right.
Mm.
Right. And that's because recovery becomes about living your life again. It becomes about positively engaging and creating a purpose for yourself again. You know, you said that that at one point you would sort of empathize with me seeing myself as a victim. There's a lot to that, Joe, in accepting the idea that you are a victim. Then it becomes very rational for you to say, well, this is just how I deal with that now. I don't accept victimhood. I've never thought of it as something that should be praised. I think that strong people manage to get over terrible things that happen in their lives. And they refuse to identify themselves as victims. We have like a victim culture on the left that's their entire moral premise is completely inverted. And
perverted.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is perverted and inverted in every possible way that you could think that I'm addressing that. So, like, you know, I mean, that's that. And to talk about like positively engaging my wife, my life, you know, that's like when you're living your life sober through the program, you begin to take positive steps in a direction that gives you a meaning. And that's where it came to working with these wonderful animals that you have on the screen. That's how I met my wife.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get. If we can talk a little bit about the tiger part and how you met your wife, and how, you know, things ended up working out really well for you. And the working with the tigers is just like kind of its own amazing thing on its own.
Well,
and a privilege. It's actually like a privilege.
Right.
It's not a thing that like, you know, these are kind of like the gods of the animal world. This is not like, you know, like I view it as kind of a privilege.
Well, I worked with mountain lions in relocating them in Wisconsin with my dad. And that's, you know, you trap them or you tranquilize them. Like mountain lions in North America, a mountain lion is a much smaller animal than a tiger is. And they don't live naturally in Wisconsin. They actually live in the southern area, south in southern Illinois, extending down to Missouri. There's a population that lives there. That's a breeding population. That's an established population. They are there. And then there's another population of mountain lions that live in like Canada. And so when the police or regular people in Wisconsin would sight a mountain lion, my dad and I used to go and track it down, and if we could, tranquilize it, and then take it up into the northern parts of Wisconsin away from people and release it, because they were all migrating males or females that were looking to go to that population that was in Canada to our north. And so we would get them past the populated areas where they would come across people. And I went to go and do a very similar thing, and I won't be very specific about it. But that is doing that sort of exact thing with these animals was sort of how like my wife found me. And we did that together there in Thailand. And that's how I got to know her. That's how our relationship started with each other. And I went back to Thailand 3 times. My relationship with her further and deepened each time. Now I am married to her, and she is living here in the United States with me. And going through and getting her her citizenship, her becoming a naturalized citizen in the United States. She has her application outstanding with USCIS and is going through the process. But she has helped to change my life, and she comes with me. Believe it or not, Joe, she she supports me absolutely in the AA program. She comes with me to these meetings. I was very upfront and told her about my substance abuse history in our first conversation with each other. And she has never seen me use a drug or take a drink in my life.
Nice.
That she's seen, right? And I'm going to keep that streak going because I am fully me when I'm sober, and I am a somewhat diminished and angry version of myself when I'm habitually using. I just won't go back to being that person. I'm a much more I'm much happier this way. And I don't say that to try and like convince myself of something. No, this is something that my experiences have convinced me of, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I think it's awesome. So how did you end up in Thailand able to work with them?
that was through my wife. My wife found me and requested that I go there.
Oh,
And
but I'm saying, were you like on Facebook talking about doing
she
things
found
for
me on the
cats or
internet
something
and
like that?
contacted me through a WhatsApp program. And
Cool.
that's how we became aware of each other. She wanted me to come and do a specific thing, and that specific thing grew into other services that I delivered for them. And I'm being I'm
Yeah, you
being
don't say any
purposely
details you don't want to say. That's fine.
I'm being purposely ambiguous here because the tigers themselves, this is not a public operation that she's engaged in. The tigers themselves, there's only 6,000 of them that are left in the wild. Their primary threat is China and the Chinese people, because they believe in hunting these animals and using their meat and their bones in their traditional medicine.
Yeah, for medicine. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One country and one people don't have the right to denude the world of this amazing animal.
Yeah, they really are amazing. I can see why the Chinese probably think they do have a lot of power and stuff, because they probably do, but it's not right to kill these. It's they're such a majestic being. I think they're pretty much the most amazing animal that we have here, and it's really a shame if they became extinct from us. Killing them so some Chinese guy can try to get his dick hard.
Well,
Tiger
they're
blood or
right on the
something.
verge. They are an endangered species. And like I said, 6,000 of them. And Thailand is one of the very, very few places where you can go and see these animals in the flesh.
Yeah. It's got to be very frightening seeing one in the wild.
Yeah,
I would
they are
imagine.
amazing.
Yeah.
They're like when you go to see a tiger at a zoo, those are not animals who have had to kill to live. Those are animals who have had meat slid on a tray underneath their door.
Yeah.
And they are more akin to being like domesticated house animals.
Yeah.
Because they've never had to grow up and sharpen any of their skills and proficiently hunt other wild animals. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
These tigers in Thailand are hunters. They are
Savages.
predators.
Yeah.
And so the look that you see in their eyes is unlike anything that you'll ever see in a zoo. I mean, these are
I would imagine if you see one, your DNA makes yourself like just start shitting your pants, because like if this thing wants to, well, first off, you would never even see it coming. If this thing wants to kill you, it can so easily. You'd never even realize it, probably.
unless you're in a tree.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of hint there.
And then if you're up in a tree, it'll just say, "Okay, I'll just wait for you to like eventually come down."
Right. Right.
Or
And
it'll come up. Yeah, and they
Yeah.
will. They'll just sit there and wait for days on end, and it will be fine.
And tigers are they're different from lions. Lions are a pride-based animal. Everything in a lion's life comes through the pride. That's their paradigm, right? Tigers are loners. There is no pride with tigers. They all, the ones that exist out in the wild, do so of their own accord. They eat based on their skills and ability to hunt wild animals. So if you're encountering a tiger in the wild, you're encountering a successful predator.
Yeah.
A predator who's managed to kill from a very young age, from the first year of life, all the way until the time that you're encountering them. They have made successive kills in order to put bulk on their bodies.
Yeah.
They don't get a free meal. There's no such thing as a free meal out in the jungle. The existence for these animals is fraught with danger. They get injured. They break their bones. They get sick just like we do. If you kill one, that could be the only mating male or mating female in 40 or
like
50 miles
or something.
Yeah. So that's why I have a real heart out for these animals, and I'm willing to put my life in danger, in jeopardy, in order to do what I do. They are this is just something that has a special meaning and purpose in my life, and I take it very seriously. I wanted
Have you been able to do any more of this work, or you
I'm waiting until
I'm
waiting until Ratana and the preserve. I want to say this. The preserve in Thailand, these animals are not kept in cages. They are allowed to go out and hunt. They are treated in these cages, and the ones that you see pictured are being treated for injuries. The Thais keep them wild. So these animals go back out. And this is like this is something that just a very interesting story. In Thailand, the national animal is the elephant. Okay. And if you know anything about elephants, you can't tell them a damn thing, especially the wild ones. The Thais have a very Buddhist way of living and a Buddhist perspective about it, where they see these animals as creations of God. And so when like the
tiger especially represents the most high creation
yes, it's part of the world that God created, right? The Thais, like when these wild elephants, when they walk through like a Thai city, what the Thai police will do is to tell people to go into their homes, and they will block off the streets and let the elephants come through. They don't like try and herd them or push them in any direction. Nope. We're going to let these animals walk through, and what they damage, they damage. What they mess up, they mess up. But this is just part of the cost of living in proximity with these amazing creatures. And like, there's a real, like I really took note of that, because that was such a departure from how we deal with wildlife here in America. And I wish that we could bring that. I wish, sorry, my dog was freaking out in the background. I wish that we could bring that tradition here to the West, where we learn to better coexist with these wild animals.
Well, Karen won't have it. They want to talk about it, but they won't actually do it. If they see an animal in their backyard, they want it killed.
Yeah.
They love that. They're scared. A lot of them are just scared of the natural world. In fact, I just did a tree job recently for somebody that needs some trees down. She's like, well, I see too many wild turkeys back there, and I think they're going to attack my kids, so we're putting up a fence. I was like, oh my God. Like, it just is like, but that's their mentality. It's very fear-based. And they kind of really don't give a shit about animals. They try to say that they do, but they kind of don't. They're like, well,
it's
care like about it, but not in my backyard, put it in someone else's backyard.
Right. They call that the NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. Meaning that I want to tell you to have it in your backyard, but I don't want it in mine. Yeah,
exactly.
That's very much an East Coast elitist type thing. I think that when it comes to the tigers and the elephants, and even like the wild deer that I have on my property, Ratana and I, we feed them every night. I like, I spend my money on, corn and nuts and stuff like that for them. I don't do that so that I can like turn around and shoot them. I actually don't hunt deer at all. I don't trophy hunt. I don't do any of that. I just enjoy being with them, seeing them. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to touch them. I don't want to, like I put food in my backyard, and there's a herd of deer that come through and they will eat it. And that is how we coexist together. And that's how far I take things. I don't ever try and get close to them or anything else like that. Like I think that's like coexistence,
Yeah.
Because there's mutual benefit there.
Yeah, and a little bit of feeding the animals goes a long way. My parents live actually in a suburban neighborhood, and it's like a freaking zoo there. They get so many deer, herons, snapping turtles and shit like that you wouldn't even imagine that, because they're putting out food every night and stuff like that. And like, the animals are just trying to live too. Like, we are kind of fucking up their environment.
Right.
We have to counterbalance it a little bit. And like I particularly have a lot of experience with loons, as I live on a lake, and there's a bunch of loons around, and they're actually really some of them will actually like come right up to you. I don't feed them or anything because they're fine, but we really need to appreciate the wildlife more. But the only way you can appreciate it, you have to go like see it and experience it. And a lot of people are more living in a metaverse digital world where they don't have an appreciation for it. Like, seeing these animals makes you believe in God more, because you're like, something created this amazing thing, and it's so complex and everything. And like, even if evolution is real, it's like, well, look at how it had to evolve and have these patterns on itself, and it knows how to live, it knows what to do, how to migrate, and all this. Like, at a certain point, you're like, well, there's got to be some type of amazing creator that has made this, and like, whether you think it's God or not, or whatever you want to call it.
You also don't have to pit the idea of evolution, right, and adaptation. That doesn't not have to be the enemy of faith.
Yeah,
You can,
yeah, no, yeah, I
you
agree. They
can,
can
they
coexist.
can
Yeah,
be complementary and explain each other, right?
yeah,
Evolution can explain the process that God used to create these creatures. You don't have
yeah,
to always pit religion against science.
yeah.
In my view,
I agree.
the physical sciences explain how the kind of how God created this perfect world.
Yeah,
Not perfect world as in that everything turns out right for everybody. What I'm saying is that when it was created, and I don't think that it was created in 6 days. When it was created, what I mean is that that the biomes and the wildlife that have grown as a result of the resources and the flow of energy through the food chain, that is sort of a perfect system.
it's just amazing. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And like even it even gets more amazing because there's a whole like level we can't see of like bacteria,
Yeah.
organisms,
Organisms.
fungi,
Yeah.
like all this stuff is like a whole world of it that we don't even see, like, like germs and diseases and everything like that, affects all this stuff, and that's like a whole other layer that we can't even see. So it's like it's amazingly complex, and yeah, I definitely think they do coexist. Like that's what I'm saying. Like, but the only way you can figure that out is you can't read about it. I mean, I guess you can kind of read about it, but you just got to go out
And
in nature and
experience it.
just shut up and just sit there and just look at it and experience it, and you're like, it kind of like, I don't know if you like, it just will like kind of all come to you. Then it's just like, well, I don't know, like I can't think of any other way how it kind of like, I don't know, that's the conclusion that I came to. I think I that's why I like sort of that Native American view of like, oh, there's a creator. You don't need to read about it. You don't need to read or anything or have like, some Book of Mormon or Bible or anything. You can just say like, oh, well, there's a creator that has made nature, and like you can just leave it at that. And there you go. You're not an atheist now. Like otherwise if you're an atheist, it's like, well, that's great, but I think you're also just thinking that there's like evolution, but something had to make evolution happen too. Like there has to be some creative force, even if it's a simulation or whatever you want to think. Like there has to be some creative force.
Yeah.
Period.
I
It-
think when I was going to college, they spoke about it in terms of intelligent design.
yeah,
But I think that they got off track in like trying to say that again, trying to pit Darwinism against the idea
yeah,
that intelligent design. I think that those two ideas need to be more seamlessly integrated with each other. Because
yeah. Well,
that's how I
Darwin
look at
even
it.
said that he believes in God. He's like,
Yeah.
there has to be that. So like, but they it's more easy to manipulate people who are more atheistic and stuff, or they have less values that they stand for, or less morals and stuff.
Well,
In
the
my opinion,
people who don't recognize that there is a higher power outside of their life, those people generally suffer from greater amounts of malignant
yeah,
narcissism, and hedonism. And they're it's interesting because it's sort of like I go back to me drinking when I came home, and that was like my temporary relief, but that kept me, it was like the monkey's paw, right? That kept me suspended in a state where then I needed a drink every day because the drinking really kind of shut down my ability to acknowledge and grieve the traumatic experiences that I went through. Similar with those people, it's their hedonism and narcissism that pushes them away from happiness.
yeah,
So it's like that self-fulfilling circle. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And so like that's how when I meet like these militant atheists who reject all God, it's like you do realize that like, there's only like 6% of humanity that agrees with you. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
And that leads me to that leads me to believe that like what you're demonstrating is more like the result of like a mental illness. than it is like a conscious, a principled and noble pursuit that you're engaging in. You're really just looking down on other people who openly express their religious beliefs. Because
Yeah,
for all of humanity's history, we have had a deity. Whether that's in the East with my wife's culture, and Buddhism, or Judaism or Christianity, or you go and you look at some of the religions like Zoroastrianism or Baha'ism, Hinduism. Like, there have always been, in every culture, it has generated some kind of deity. And I don't take a cynical Karl Marx, that's the opiate of the masses. No, that's been like our
it's the
religious
default
traditions.
mode.
Our religious traditions actually somewhat teach us our identity. And you look at like the Western paradigm, like with England and America, it was Christians who started the abolition movement, that ended up ending slavery as we knew it back then. That came out of Christianity. So sometimes our best traditions, the advances that we've made, come as a result of how our faith has inspired us. So I don't take a cynical view of that at all. I think that you're an idiot, and you don't know your history. If you just straight up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think is there anything else you want to cover, or a last
No, my
message or
friend,
something?
we covered like everything else. If you want to, for your listeners, go ahead and post that letter that I wrote to my Congressman Glenn Grothman, if they want to see some of the specifics that I was talking about when it came to addressing the issue of veteran substance abuse and suicide. That's,
I'll
again,
put it in the Discord, but I'll link it in the description somehow if I can, and then I'm gonna cut this into smaller clips, which I think are going to be more digestible to the average person, because this is going to be too long for them to listen to.
yeah.
So like via some shorts, or even just smaller, like 15-minute segments or something. So like you also have something that you could send to somebody or something like that too. Like
Yep.
it's more usable that way. So like this was more so we could create content from this.
Right.
So I'll work on that, and I will put links to all your stuff in the description, and I'll make note of that too, so they can read that article and other stuff like that. I can put your links to X, and if you're doing any other media like that, I can include that in there as well. So, and then I think maybe not right away, but once I have all this stuff, I'll like promote some of the clips so they get pushed out into the algorithm more.
Absolutely.
So, but I'm gonna like cut it up and like fine tune it, and dress it up nice, and make good descriptions and stuff on it. So
you know what you're doing, Joe.
Yeah, I'm getting better at it. So I'll just keep doing that, and then we can even do this another time. So have a good night. Tell your wife and stuff I said hi, and take care.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. I much appreciate it.
Yeah,
you have
my
a great
pleasure.
night.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.